Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Raghu Sagi. Raghu is the Chief Information Officer of Inspire Brands, a multi-brand restaurant company whose portfolio includes nearly 32,000 Arby's, Baskin-Robbins, Buffalo Wild Wings, Dunkin', Jimmy John's, Rusty Taco, and Sonic Drive-In restaurants worldwide, with system sales of roughly $30 billion annually. In his role, he oversees all business and technical aspects of Inspire Brands' technology shared services, including customer-facing digital, data, restaurant technology, enterprise architecture, enterprise applications, infrastructure, and security. He's been in his current role for roughly 3 years, and prior to his current role was the Senior Vice President and Chief Engineering Officer of Sephora. Raghu, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be here.
Excellent. Well, Raghu, I gave a brief introduction into Inspire Brands just for a bit of context, but would love to see if there's anything you would add to that in describing the business.
Yeah, I think that what I would add to is that these are unique brands, been out there for a long time, very well-known brands. We have about 4.3 billion interactions with our guests through a year. So second largest restaurant company as a system sales goes. I think that's kind of shows the how as a portfolio that we are serving a lot of guests and the unique day parts that we call it throughout the day, if you will. And that's what we want to continue to do and influence the experience through technology.
Well, as I ran through that list of many iconic brands that make up the portfolio, most people who are listening to this would certainly be familiar with those, though they may be less familiar with Inspire Brands, the kind of umbrella above the entire organization that, of course, you're a part of. Naturally, from your perch, you have reason to think about what should we be doing commonly across these brands versus perhaps some things that are unique to each that require unique solutioning, a unique customer experience, engagement, and so on. Talk a little bit about how you think about that divide between those things that ought to be common versus those things where a unique solution might be appropriate.
You know, if you look at the overall our approach to the portfolio and multi-tenant approach to it, if you think about it, especially on the technology side, Peter, so all of the technology building blocks, right? I mean, if you think about either enterprise applications or collaboration tools or security, if you think about it, these are not something that are going to be unique to every brand, right? Because those are all common. And that's one of the ideas behind our synergies is to be able to do that. We don't want every customer experience that is, somebody that visiting Sonic Drive-In. We want that experience to be very unique to them. In Sonic versus when they go to Buffalo Wild Wings to have a beer and a wing with friends. Right? So while we want to keep that experience unique, we want to figure out what are some of the things we could do from a technology, tools, and process standpoint that can allow our guest experience and team member to be able to get the better value from our investment. So it starts from a top level. I think it's more on the strategy of what should be unique. And I talked about the experiences should be unique. But driving those experiences, what are some of the building blocks that could be common? And especially given it's a technology, like I said, multi-tenant digital platform or data platform, or how do we bring the insights and analytics and advanced AI type of things, could be all platforms that could be approached for all brands. That's kind of how I think about it when I'm looking at the strategy.
You have another constituency that you also work with, and that is the franchisees. Yeah. And talk a bit about the interactions with them, how you influence them, how you draw insights from them, and so forth.
Yeah, they are a big part of our ecosystem, right? I mean, we obviously want to be a preferred choice partner for someone that's willing to come to us. It's like, and that's why we have a unique brands, and we want to make sure that they're getting from us as a franchisor everything that they would look at it and say value add. So when it comes to technology, I think we would first and foremost make sure that we are able to talk about why we are introducing a new technology and what's the value behind it. And the great thing about Inspire Brands is that we have a lot of corporate stores, which means that anything we do before we ask our franchisees to do is something that we test and pilot, and especially in Arby's and Buffalo Wild Wings and Sonic. And I think we have a unique way of saying, okay, let's do this. And so that you can see how this works and we can refine some of these things. And then we go back to, but along the way through the journey, we're always transparent. If you're bringing something, what is the technology is going to do? And so that they can weigh in and ask questions and things like that.
You've alluded to it a couple of times in your responses, and I'd love to go a little bit deeper on the notion of customer experience and the role that your team plays in augmenting it and making for a truly great customer experience as it applies across the diverse array of businesses that make up your portfolio. Talk a bit about your evolution in terms of the thought process of digital customer experience, as well as digital as an enhancement to in-person experience as well.
And, if you look at, I think it's important to kind of tell a little bit of a context behind Inspire Brands, right? You look at the last maybe decade and a half or 2 decades, what retail, hospitality, banking have gone through, right? They all have, looking at the team productivity, where they're actually using their team members and serving the guests, they could call them customers, clients, guests, whatever that might be. All of them transformation over the last 2 decades, we in the restaurant industry haven't seen anything like that, right? So if you look at Inspire Brands, the idea behind the investments we're making and the way we are looking at it is that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for us to make our guest experience really way far better than what they have today. And every touch point, right? I mean, it could be you walking into our restaurants, you're driving through, or you're driving in, taking out curbside, or getting delivered. So we have so many touch points with our guests, and we want to make sure that those touch points are served well, right? I mean, that's first and foremost. Guests have options and they want choices, right? And 2, when you're talking about serving the guests, and we need to be able to provide our team members the tools and techniques and processes and automation that allows us for us to be able to kind of serve them better. So with those 2 in mind, we have been doubling down on how do we make that experience to be better. And I think if I just talked a little bit about you look at, for example, Buffalo Wild Wings, we were able to kind of say, we tested something called a choice model. So you can walk in and you can place an order on your phone, or you can talk to a server, or you can pay on your phone, or you can pay at the table, or you can walk in and pay. So all of these meant that the guest experience is front and center. It comes from convenience, it comes from their choices, because guests are asking for choices. And just because they have been trained that way in every other place that they have been to. So
it's interesting you raise that, Raghu. You come from other industries as well, like retail, for instance, and you talked about how the evolution of digital and the residue of that experiences, those experiences that we have across our entire journey as consumers of all that we consume, impacts our expectations, even if it's very different businesses naturally that we're doing business with. If we're eating, if we're buying something to wear, if we are banking, if we are consuming data, or watching something on television or on our computers, just to name a few of course, a multiplicity of options that we have as consumers. Talk a bit about, from a recruiting perspective, during these times when you are going through such significant transformation, how you've thought about recruiting people who know what good looks like.
Yeah. And that's actually a phenomenal question. I think, the reason I came here, right? I mean, I think, this is a story I tell, and I think it's my favorite story because it's important for someone that's looking at restaurant industry or looking at Inspire Brands to know. I was in San Francisco working for Sephora, and it's a retailer. It's a uniquely driving the experience and the brand through technology and personalization. And when I first got the interactions with Paul, CEO of Inspire Brands, through a little bit of a mutual connection, right? As he laid out his vision for what is he doing at Inspire Brands, and it was very compelling because everything that I just talked about, technology hasn't been a friend to a restaurant industry. And what we're doing right now, I've been here 3 years and had a chance to see firsthand how the restaurant industry works. What are we trying to do? when I took the job, we didn't have Jimmy John's or Dunkin' or Baskin, so that acquisitions have made us, to a scale where we can actually do a lot of investment. So the way I think about it is that digital data, data science, advanced analytics, using machine learning, computer vision, all of these technologies that other industries have used to be able to drive some of this, restaurant industry hasn't done much at all. Can you imagine if you're walking into almost looking like a startup, but $30 billion of system sales now, and influence from ground up on how you can add value and bring those experiences from other industries, if you will, or where you have gone through this, and being able to look at the next 2-3 years of journey and say we can dramatically change this industry. That's kind of how we're looking at the leaders, right? And when I look at hiring itself, I mean, obviously we look for expertise, and people have done it, but we also are looking for folks that have basic computer science degrees or things that people have done something and willing to come to us where they can be ground level and learning a lot of these type of things. So if you went to Google or Facebook, and again, they may not agree with me, but you're going to be one of the smaller fish in a larger pond, right? But if you come here, you can touch many brands, many experiences. You can build a lot of the platforms that you're building, and fast forward 1, 2, 3 years down the road and say, man, I was part of that transformation of not only Inspire Brands, but probably the industry itself.
That's a compelling message to offer to a recruit, to say the least.
Yeah.
Well, Raghu, I know from our past conversations that you take pride in noting that you're a business leader first and a technologist second. Yeah. And I'd love for you to kind of talk a bit about what you mean by that, as well as how it drives your orientation in leading this function.
Yeah. I think if I look at any technology organization, especially the one like ourselves, right? I mean, I start and say, who are we serving, right? We serve the team members inside our restaurants, right, that serve our guests. So there are two constituents that the whole purpose for my existence or my team's existence is to be able to say the team members and guests. And in order for me to be able to provide any kind of a vision, strategy, or tools and technologies, I got to know how to drive those type of experiences for my team members and for my guests, right? And that's what my brand leaders are thinking, every minute of their, professional life, if you will. And if I put myself in their shoe and say, what drives that experience? What drives the experience of the team members? And how do you add value to your stakeholders? This thing. So if I start to think about it, then technology becomes a bit of a mechanism in which you achieve those results, right? There are tons of technologies. And if I go start to talk to business leaders about the type of technology, they're going to be lost. And especially if I talk to the franchisees, they're going to be even further lost because they're not necessarily caring about some of those buzzwords. They more care about how do you make the return on investment on the money that they're investing. So I'm always talking about it. And I think, to the business leaders to kind of understand what keeps them awake at night, what's the trends that are happening in the brands. And the more I know, the more I can live in their shoes to a certain extent, the more I can talk to the franchisees. And because we are a technology experts and we understand how do you take that problem and convert that into a solution using the tools that we have at our hand. And I think the more and more we do it, and probably not the case when I was a developer or kind of, early on in my career, it's all about technology. It's all about the cool stuff. And over the career, I think, I became more of a business leader that drives a technologist helping business problems.
It strikes me also that for a good portion of your career, you've worked in industries where you could be the consumer of this. If you worked for a defense contractor, you're probably not buying missiles personally, for example, or jet engines or whatever the case may be. In retail, certainly in a business like Inspire Brands, you and your colleagues presumably go into your restaurants or order from them and know what's working well and perhaps some areas that need some course correction as a result of that. Talk a bit about how the extent to which you do that you inspire your team to do just that, to be customers in addition to being colleagues and draw insights that would be useful.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right, Peter. So we're all customers of these, right? And we learn a ton by doing two things. One, anyone that you talk to, and then if they find out that, hey, we work for Buffalo Wild Wings or Arby's or, Inspire Brands that has all of these brands, a lot of times they offer something that either talk about the food or the experience that you have. So first and foremost, you're listening to all of your constituents, friends, family, franchisees, and all of those. And two, we encourage all of our folks to not only, try our products, but also going to work for a few hours at a time inside our restaurant so that you can actually learn to see what our team members go through as well. So we're not only testing our, food, we're not only testing our products we're putting out there because it's a lot easier to do. And then we're also asking our team members, especially the technology team members, are the people that are inside the support center to go into the restaurants and work in their shoes a little bit so that you can learn what's that look like in terms of all of the, imagine, I'll give you one example. Let's say you're serving a guest and you're trying to operate a point of sale on a Monday morning at Dunkin', and where everybody wants to just say, get a coffee and run. And your technology is like either slow or doesn't respond or not accurate, or you're fumbling through. And people that are building these technologies need to know how it should be and what a frictionless should look like. So it is part of our DNA. And obviously with the last 2 years of COVID, it became a little bit of a challenge to be able to put a lot of our folks into the restaurants to be able to learn. But we take a lot of pride, and that's part of our DNA in terms of how do we train our support center folks to be able to kind of learn what's guest thinking, and also our team members.
That's great. I wanted to ask you also, as you look to the future, Raghu, what are some trends that particularly excite you?
Yeah, I think, if I look at this, from a technologist, right? It's nothing to do with our business per se, because I'm always kind of you're hearing a lot about the automation, AI, and then a bit of a blockchain, crypto and NFT that comes up. I'm just basically being a technology background. I'm always looking at what does the technology do and all of that. But if you look at our trend that I'm watching in terms of what is pertinent to the industry that I'm in, certainly how, again, going back to the same two pillars I keep talking about is like three pillars, if you will. Guest experience. How can I help our guests to be able to have the convenience? So that includes, can the voice AI drive our experience at the drive-thru, right? Can computer vision drive some of the experiences that allows us to be able to kind of know our utilization of, how drive-thru is working? And taking the data and driving some of the use cases for us, both in terms of this is what the exciting part of coming into the Inspire Brands is that they will be able to work on some of these, right? It's taking advanced analytics and ML to drive forecast, labor modeling, or being able to drive, some of the automation. We've just put out what we call a Flippy in our Buffalo Wild Wings that does a robotics arm that allows our team members to be able to use to fry chicken wings. There's a ton of things that I'm looking at and saying, what technology that allows us to be able to do improve our productivity inside our restaurants. There is a ton on these two fronts, and then what helps our guests in terms of the digital and data side. I think those are the two that are the trends that I'm watching.
That's great. And may I ask, as you identify a trend as potentially salient and relevant to Inspire Brands, what's the process then of testing and playing around with it? Do you have a team that's cordoned off that focuses on this? Is it something that's more expansive than just a single team?
Yeah, I think, Paul Brown once said in our this thing, and we continue to use this, ideas can come from anywhere. I think that's kind of, we take it truly as because there are examples of those ideas that just, became really big. So that's kind of the foundation, number one. And two, in terms of, how we think about from a technology standpoint, we do have, we call it Maverick Den. That's one of our values. And it's kind of, inspired like a Shark Tank like thing where, we do have ideas that people can submit and we look at them. So that's kind of how we drive the innovation hackathon type of thinking inside the technology. But when it comes to piloting, we want to have a DNA where we want to have the risk taking is acceptable, right? You're not going to be able to innovate by definition without failing at times, right? I mean, it's without learning at times. So and that's the beauty of having a corporate restaurants for us, is that we can take these and we can pilot them and we see how it works. We get the feedback before we scale to the system. We put them in our restaurant. So there is it needs to be culture from the top. It needs to have the people and the agility inside the technology team that working with the business, and have the culture to be able to put it out something that's not a fully blown product into our restaurants, and then either on digital or inside the restaurants, and then get the feedback. So I think I would say we're still going through the journey. Obviously, we're not entirely there, but we have done quite a bit of that. The contactless payment and the choice model, curbside that I was talking about, they all came out of a quick pilots that we built and learned.
Oh, that's great. Well, Raghu Sagi, thank you so much for taking time with me today. A fascinating conversation encompassing this remarkable journey you've had prior to your time in Inspire Brands, but the application of what you knew beforehand to a really interesting, fast-growing, dynamic organization during times of great dynamism, much of it outside of our control as a result of the pandemic as well, but also times for that dynamism to be met with a number of innovations, as clearly you and your team are doing just that. Thank you so much for a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation with you, Peter. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.